So the World War I home front, what was the U.S. like during World War I once we finally entered the war? We're going to be talking about the various things that we did as we organized for the war front and also the Selective Service Act. So make sure you guys are taking excellent notes. So the Zimmerman Note finally triggers President Wilson to declare war on the Central Powers. Immediately thereafter, you had the Selective Service Act, which basically requires all guys from age 21 to 30 to register for the draft. It doesn't mean that they were all going to war, but they were at least registering for the draft. By 1918, you had 4 million Americans that joined the armed services. So a lot of people felt that it was their call, it was their duty to help with World War I. Not everyone went to war. What happens if you were a female? What happens if you were injured? What happens if you were old? So you had other ways that you could organize excuse me, the war effort. One of them was the preservation or the conservation of food. You had things like wheatless Mondays or meatless Tuesdays, so that they would take these products and they were able to send them overseas to the troops. And here is that propaganda promoting the food change that was going on. So like eat more cottage cheese and then you'll save on meat, so the way the meat could go over to the troops. The wheat, we need wheat, so use more corn. We need meat, so use more fish or beans. We need fats, so just use what you have to. We need sugar, so use syrups. And this is all for the cause of freedom. So it's a way for everyone to get involved in the war effort, even if you weren't fighting. And these propaganda posters were written in multiple languages. So you can see over here it was written in Hebrew so that the Jews could understand what was being said. Save your food. This is what's going to win World War I. And not only did you take on the role of saving food, but you also only received a certain ration per month or per week. So it's not like you could go buy whatever you wanted to and whenever you wanted to. You had a specific amount that you could purchase on specific days or specific weeks. Another thing you could do was called victory gardens. Basically, instead of buying food, grow your own food. So that way the food that they already have, instead of selling it to you, they could give it to the troops. And this would be an example of a victory garden during World War I. World War I also put people to work, including women, especially in factories that are making war products. So the War Industries Board told the factories what to produce. And then you had the War Labor Board that settled labor disputes, so kind of acted like a union, you could say. Young abled men were fighting, so people had to continue to move on. They had to move forward. Factories had to continue to operate. So women often took the jobs of the men that were fighting. And this is for, this was deemed as something good, something positive. You're helping out the war effort. So for every fighter, a woman worker. So basically they're asking women to step up and take on the roles that men used to take on. Another thing you could do to support the war effort is to purchase Liberty bonds. So basically you're giving the money to the federal government and then later on they'll give it back to you with interest. The government raises over $21 billion through the sale of Liberty bonds, and propaganda for Liberty bonds was through the roof. So the people that were drawing these cartoons for propaganda, they weren't just drawing what they wanted to draw. They were given specific things because they wanted to entice people to do something specific. They wanted to get out a very specific message. And the idea is, how do you bring a war that's being fought over in Europe? How do you bring that home? The people that are here, the women that are here are not experiencing the war, but how do you make it feel like it's their duty to participate? And it was the idea to make it real. So if you get a $50 bond, you're going to be able to purchase 14 rifle grenades, 160 first aid packages, truck knives, $100 you're going to be able to buy a uniform, 5 rifles, feed a soldier. So they broke it down so you knew exactly what your money was going to. And if you really loved your country, $5,000, you could buy machine guns. $50,000 you're buying a submarine, or you're maintaining a submarine, I should say. So people really donated what they could because they wanted to be part of this war, even if they weren't fighting it themselves. And here are some posters about purchasing Liberty bonds. So help crush the menace of the seas. Remember those U-boats that we were talking about before with the blood on it because they had killed so many people. This, little girl, my daddy bought me a government bond, did yours. Strike now, he's fighting for you. So they're all supposed to get people, to entice people to buy these Liberty bonds. Not only were they trying to reach people through propaganda and posters, but then you also had speeches that would urge Americans to make sacrifice. And they were called the 4-Minute Men. And here are the handsome young fellows that would give the speeches from Nebraska to the rest of America. Here's an example of a speech that they would give by the 4-Minute Men. A German spy is among us. A German spy is watching us. So they would go through the fear of people and entice you to listen that way. This is the rest of that speech, where if you had the American people lend their billions, then you're going to make America united and strong. And here's the end of that speech. Do not let the German spy hear and report that you are a slacker. Don't be a slacker. Participate in the government. Participate in victory gardens, in preserving your food, in buying Liberty bonds. And here we go, that very famous picture of Uncle Sam saying, "I want you," for the U.S. Army. Alright, so by now you should be able to answer these 4 questions. What is the Selective Service Act? How did Americans organize themselves? What is the purpose or the instructions that were given to the artists when they were doing these propaganda campaigns? And then what was the purpose of the 4-Minute Men and their speeches? So make sure you're able to answer these, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Don't forget about your blog.